Welcome to Working Progress. We're really excited to have you with us today, and even more excited to talk about a really popular topic, emotional intelligence, or as we like to call it around here, EQ. And I couldn't be more excited for our guest today, Dr. Laura Shero. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Brittany. I'm really excited to be here and talk with you about this.
It's going to be a good chat.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dr. Laura is the Vice President of Learning and Assessment at Masterminds Leadership. Masterminds Leadership was founded by the other Dr. Shero, Dr.
Yes.
Phil, in 2014. And your focus is really on building bridges, connecting people, purpose, and performance through, you guessed it, leadership.
Yes, exactly.
So talk to us a little bit about who you are and why EQ, Dr. Laura? Why is this a passion of yours?
Yeah. So I'm really passionate about EQ because of how central that I feel like that it is to all levels of success, whether we're talking in our personal lives, in our relationships, or we're talking professionally. EQ is at the center of that. And I feel like today there's kind of this idea when you talk about EQ and companies will be like, oh yeah, we're doing EQ. And there's this idea like maybe emotional intelligence is bonus points. But for me, I feel like it's really, really central. And as we have the conversation, I'll talk more about why that is, but I feel like it is just at the core. And so I love talking about it. I love teaching about it, learning about it. So that's why for me.
That's pretty incredible. And more incredible is that you love it so much, you wrote a dissertation recently,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Around EQ. And so I was thinking about this and I thought, EQ is really popular. Right now, right?
Yes.
It's almost like a buzzword.
It's a buzzword. And if you Google search it, you get like 3.5 million hits.
Whoa.
Which is a lot. And if you Google search IQ, which is also a really popular topic and it's been around kind of longer, but that's only 2.5 million. So it can be a buzzword and some people kind of dismiss it for that reason. But there's really good reason to dig into EQ.
Well, and some of the things that I have read, because, I'm kind of in this industry as well. I'm not the level of expert that you are on this, but a lot of things that you read say IQ is important, but to have a really good leader, to have a really good team member, to have a really good human that sets somebody, above the rest, it's EQ that matters.
Yes. So a name that people know is Daniel Goleman because he's really kind of the person he's not the first to research it, but he's the person who put EQ on the public radar. And the title of his book was Why EQ Can Matter More Than IQ. So people do this comparison, but you do find sometimes that people who have really great cognitive intelligence, they might struggle in certain ways, or you have people who are both really intelligent and one of them succeeds. And so this question of how can we explain these gaps that other factors don't account for, and emotional intelligence is very often the reason.
Interesting. So we should probably pause and back up just a little bit because I feel it. We're going down the trail. We keep talking about EQ. You know what EQ is. I know what EQ is. Mm-hmm. Emotional intelligence or emotional quotient is what it stands for.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit for maybe somebody that's heard EQ or this buzzword, but like, what's it really mean? What is EQ? Kind of by definition.
Right. And I won't go too far into the technical, but just defining EQ can be tricky because there are a variety of people out there who are studying it and they do look at it in different ways. And so it's important sometimes. People like to quote research studies and all, and they do look at it. Some people do really treat it like an intelligence with right and wrong answers. And so that is kind of one branch. The way I look at it and the way that TTI's assessment works is not like that, not like a true intelligence. Some people even call it maybe emotional self-efficacy. That's a word that's a descriptor out there when they say it's not really intelligence in the sense that IQ is, but it is a kind of skill or competency or self-efficacy. I define it when I talk to people, I say emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand and manage our emotions, or to help people around us do that. And I really do break it down into those 3 segments. It's recognizing, I'm feeling something. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling stressed, feeling distressed, I'm excited. That's the recognition. Then understanding, not just why am I angry? I mean, not just understanding that I am angry,
Sure.
but why am I angry? Is it because, I was depending on direct reports to bring me projects that they didn't come through on? Maybe it's a self-imposed. I didn't give myself time, but not just what am I feeling, but understanding why I'm feeling that. And then can I manage that emotion? Can I do something with it? Or again, applying it to others. So really, I break it down into those 3 parts of recognition, understanding, and then management.
I love that. And I myself and suspect that many others, the hardest part of that, at least for me, is doing something about it, right? The management part.
Yes.
Do you have any tips or tricks for people who are sitting here going, okay, I got this part. Like I understand, or I can identify when I'm having an emotion. But then how do we do something about it, right? Like,
Right.
can we do anything about it?
We can. It's a skill. It's a skill. And so, that is the $1 million question. Can we do something about it? And we can. I do give, and I will, a little simple trick. But the most important thing to know is that it is a skill. So if you're going to learn tennis, if you're going to learn basketball, if you're going to learn golf, if you're going to learn to draw, you have to practice. And so learning to recognize your emotions, learning to manage your emotions, it's not something where you sit in a 2-hour seminar and then you go out and you're like,
Well,
I did it. I did it. It's a start. You need to do that. But it takes practice. It takes daily practice of saying, what am I feeling? And building the language. Most people they only have 3 words to talk about emotions. People know whether they're happy, sad, or mad.
You just blew my mind thinking
Yes.
that it's that simple.
Yes. That is all that most people can do. They have 3 words. So just starting to build a more sophisticated, we can manage what we have language to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's the first step, is building that language. But first of all, just knowing that it's a skill and knowing it's going to take time. And just because I'm like, okay, now I recognize I have emotions, I'm going to try to manage them, you're not immediately successful. When I do talk to people where I just, I have 5 minutes to say, what is the one tip or trick that I can say for emotional self-regulation? It's breathing. That is the best thing that you can do. Is just, I was talking with a client yesterday and she was like, I just get my verbal fluency goes away when I'm emotionally hijacked and I have all these things I want to say and I can't say them. And I'm like, just stop and breathe. And if you're in the middle of the conversation and you can just stop and think and take some deep breaths, or if you need to say, can I have 30 seconds to go get a drink of water, and you go breathe. But physiologically in your body, that air helps your brain work better. And when you breathe out, something called the parasympathetic nervous system starts to counteract the stress effects in your body. And so as you breathe out, muscles relax, blood pressure goes down. And it sounds so simple. People are like, just tell me to breathe. But it really does help. So if there's one tip or trick that I'm like, just take some time to breathe.
So scientifically, this is proven. This isn't just
proven.
According to Dr. Laura, which, don't get me wrong, I think you're fabulous. But this is proven.
This is proven. I mean, Navy SEALs spend, I'm just saying just a simple breathing, but Navy SEALs will do like weeks of training on specific breathing techniques where they can go in and go under the radar and lower their blood pressure and their pulse rate and all kinds of things. So you can take breathing to a really high level. So yes, there's lots of science behind the breathing.
So incredible and so easy. I mean,
right.
Everyone in theory has the ability to improve their EQ just by breathing.
Just by breathing.
And I love your tip. Just say, hold on, let me go grab a drink of water, or let me excuse myself for a minute. You don't have to be like, I'm having an emotional meltdown.
Exactly.
Right. You used a term that I thought was interesting, and I want to make sure everybody knows what it means. Emotionally hijacked?
Yes. So yes, so that's a term that we talk about. And I mean, you can Google it. You can Google crazy things people do when they're emotionally hijacked.
I bet that's a fun rabbit trail to go down.
Yes. There's some crazy scenes of, fists flying and eggs flying and all kinds of things. But in our brain, we have, some kind of lower level instinctual thinking. It's built into our body to protect us when we're afraid, when there's a snake, when there's something we really need to fight or flight. That's in our amygdala. And that's going to react first to save us. But, when we're in a conflict with a coworker, we don't need to react the same way, but those instincts are there. But our frontal brain, that's really the CEO that makes those wise decisions, it's got to get through that kind of lower level brain first. And so when the lower level brain is making those fight or flight decisions for us, we call that emotional hijacking.
Great. So your brain doesn't know that you're upset with a coworker versus you're being chased by a bear.
Yes.
At the onset.
At that level. Yeah. At that level.
Yeah. So I think we've already started to kind of talk about this a little bit. But EQ is super important to just about anything or, anyone. But why is it important for me as a human, right?
Yeah.
Both personally, right? I guess I'm a wife, I'm a sister, right? Things like that, a friend, and as a professional. Why is that so important? Or why should we care?
Why? Yeah. Why should we care? Yeah, I said earlier, people tend to think bonus points for caring about emotions. Yeah, we do emotional intelligence at our company because we care about culture or because we care about it. We care about our employees. And so, this is something we do. We're not just about productivity, but anybody needs to care about EQ, not for productivity, for relationships and for everything, because there is no decision that is not an emotional decision. Now, Dr. Ron likes to say this, but it is so true. There is a neuroscientist his name is Antonio Damasio, and he's a medical doctor and also a researcher, and he worked with patients who, unfortunately, had the emotion center of their brain damaged.
Wow.
And so they were fully their memory was intact, their language was intact, everything else was there except that emotion center. Now think about what you would expect. If you go to Star Trek, you're like, that's ideal, right? I can utterly remove emotions and I can make totally logical decisions. But what happened in Damasio's patients is they utterly lost the ability to make rational decisions.
What?
Even something as simple as, what do I want to eat for dinner tonight? They could not make those decisions when the emotion center of their brain was damaged. And that's because emotions are tied in. If you're for example, you say, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to eat a healthy diet. There are still decisions to make that are not, you can't make a pro-con list. Are green beans better than asparagus? How are you going to make that decision? It's a value-based judgment. And so emotions are tied into everything that we do. And if we say we're going to separate them out, we're not. We're lying to ourselves. And then if they are physiologically separated out, we lose the ability to function.
Wow.
So when I say emotional intelligence is central to everything we do, every decision is an emotional decision. Emotions are here to stay. You can't take them out. And so we need to learn how to manage them well. We need to learn how to incorporate them. And sometimes they're good. Even things like anger. Sometimes we get mad for good reasons. I mean, sometimes the anger takes over. That's not good. But sometimes the anger is... Emotions are a signal telling us that something is wrong or something is good. It's information. And so what do we do with that? And so we have to learn how to recognize, use, manage emotions, because they're there for good or for ill, whether we want them or not. All day.
Every day.
Yeah.
I think it was this morning I heard somebody say we make 35,000 decisions a day.
Yes.
35,000 times a day we need EQ is what I just heard.
Exactly.
That's pretty important.
Yeah.
That's pretty important. Okay, so let's take it to a different level.
Okay.
So, yes, it's important. So important, and so you're so passionate about it that you wrote an entire dissertation about it.
I did.
So talk to us. Did you find out anything cool? Did you learn anything new? Like what should we pay attention to based on this?
Yes. Well, a couple of different things. One is just that, first of all, we talk about, emotions being integrated into every decision, everything that we're doing. When that emotional intelligence is working well, it is correlated to all kinds of positive life outcomes. So, I mentioned in the beginning, whether we're talking personal or professional, but high EQ is related to lower levels of stress. Good EQ is related to academic achievement and learning. High EQ is related to all kinds of different positive job performance outcomes. So, if you're talking to clients and you want to say, why do they need EQ? People with higher EQ do better on the job, typically. So that is so important. Whether you're interested in better social relationships, a better marriage, better parenting relationships, better job performance, EQ can help you. At the same time, as I investigated EQ over a 5-year span, what we saw is that while EQ can change, while we can learn, while we can grow, while we can develop it, it tends to remain stable. So it's not going to change on its own. I studied EQ over the course 2.5 years before COVID, 2.5 years after COVID.
Oh, I bet that was interesting.
You would expect, here is a global experiment in stress and pressure being placed on people. EQ did not tend to change.
Really?
It remained stable, which on the one hand, that's good. On the one hand, that's good because what you want, what we're all teaching when we say emotional intelligence can help you, you want emotional intelligence to be the stable thing that is buffering that stress. If emotional intelligence is going to help you manage stress, you want the emotional intelligence to stay the same and to buffer the stress. So that's good news. What it means is we're going to have to press a lever on emotional intelligence if we want it to change. So to anybody who's a coach, a consultant out there who's like, why should I care about EQ? People out there who want to improve their emotional intelligence, they're going to need some help. It's not like I'm just going to sit here and as I age, that's kind of one of the myths that's out there.
That's
is that
what
emotional.
I always thought. Yeah.
And there are some studies, but again, those are specifically with that ability level, with treating emotional intelligence. They compared adolescents to adults and says, does it change? Well, it did. It does.
Well,
There's a difference between,
right? And
right.
It's I would think that's a totally different viewpoint, right?
Yes.
Or environment.
Right. It's a different question. It's a different question, and it's studying emotional intelligence in a different way. But just to say, we have people who are on the job and they're like, well, I've been a manager for 30 years, so I know what I'm doing. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So the good news is emotional intelligence can change, but it's not just going to do it by itself. It's going to, whatever your level, if you're high, it's going to be high. If you're low, it's going to tend to stay there unless we push some levers to change it.
So do you have any insight into what are those levers, right? So you're talking about this, and I suspect you're talking about you need an outside source or an outside somebody maybe to hold you accountable. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. And the specific intentionality, like I said, if you don't learn tennis by, watching tennis, you learn tennis by practicing. And so that you're going to have to say, where am I weak? You're going to have some outside sources. You're going to have to do some training. You're going to have to set reminders on your phone where you're like, what am I feeling now? Trying to track that, recognize, understand. You're going to have to do those things to move that lever.
And so what I hear you saying is that's one of the things, that's one of those levers, and maybe it helps if you have somebody that can help hold you responsible or accountable to it, but also just maybe journaling, like this is what I'm feeling right now.
So that's one of the things.
Why.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we have our clients do when we're doing trainings is we just say, we know it's a little bit annoying, but set timers on your phone and do it. We'll say do it at lunchtime and then do it at the end of the day. But actually, if you're not in the habit of self-assessing and of recognizing, you just need to start establishing that habit. So set yourself a timer that goes off at lunchtime, and then you say, what am I feeling? Am I having a good day?
Sure.
So many of us, and our culture is geared this way too, is we just plow ahead. And we're very often taught to ignore, am I tired? Am I frustrated? Am I sad? Maybe you had a fight with your kid at home and then you came to work and the report's due at noon and we just power through. Mm-hmm. Or we try to, but we don't do our best work when we're emotionally hijacked. And so rarely do we take the time to say, and then we shoot off those emails that are not well written. We turn in the reports that leave things out, and we haven't taken time to assess where we are. And it does take time, and especially on the front end, people will say, hey, this can be a time investment. And I'm like, but think about what's happening. Is there a time investment in going back and repairing those relationships? Right. Is there time investment in going back and getting that report right that you just did in a hurry because you were mad and ticked off and needed to get it done? There's a time investment on the other end too.
Well, and just take the 5, 10, 30 seconds to really think about, well, how am I feeling? As you were talking through that, I went, ooh, I'm really bad about this. I get through the day, and then, at the end of the day, I have a lovely spouse, and he'll look at me and say, how was your day? And I go, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I haven't even thought about it, right? So just taking that time to do that, what I'm hearing you say, can actually help improve our EQ in the long run.
Yeah, it can.
Well, that seems easy.
Yeah. Here's another really easy tip for emotional self-regulation, and that is to get enough sleep. And that's another thing that we tend to wear like a badge of honor. And I can get by on 6 hours of sleep.
How many hours of sleep did you not get last night? Right?
Yeah. But the research shows that really only about 2% of the population can really do well with 6 hours of sleep or less. So if you're not that and you're getting 6 hours or less, then you're settling for less than your peak performance.
And why? Why show up at less than your best?
Exactly.
If we can help it.
And the research really shows that we're all toddlers with, the 2-year-old who hasn't had their nap and they're cranky and they're tired and they don't interact well. And, maybe as adults, we've learned to do a little bit better self-regulation, but with less than enough sleep, we're all emotional toddlers. And so, why interact that way?
Sorry, I just have this visual of everyone walking around like grumpy like a toddler.
Yes.
The visual of that. But you're so right. You're so right. Like, why? Why do that?
So, I say it's easy. I mean, it's simple. It's not easy because we have a lot of competing commitments, but just getting enough sleep can help us. Again, it's in the brain. And so that frontal part of our brain, needs the rest. Otherwise, we're going to just default to the lower level brain that's going to just react. And we don't want to just react. We want to exercise our thoughtful reactions rather than our gut instinct reactions.
Take that pause, right?
Take the pause. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about, what can a normal person do? Like I don't have a PhD.
Right.
Okay. So I can breathe.
You can breathe.
And I can get enough sleep.
Yes.
And I can stop and recognize what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way and then try to manage it. Yeah. So 3 really easy, simple tips. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So how do we use this? How would you talk to someone who's in our industry, in our network? Someone who lives in this space, if you will, this talent development space, and who maybe might want to use this with their clients or, utilize some of these techniques. Why care? Why is that important? And how might they approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think back to some of the points that we've made earlier, if they're trying to sell maybe to a client to say, why should you do this? The correlation, the connection between emotional intelligence and all of these beneficial outcomes, especially job performance, of course, matters in the space that we work in. That's what they can say as they're trying to potentially bring this to a new client. Improving emotional intelligence is going to help. It's not just, hey, are we going to all be friendly and not fight more, but we are actually going to be more productive, because we don't do our best work when we're emotionally hijacked. And so your workers really will be. And then, if you're not used to using the emotional intelligence, then we have some great resources in the network for, bringing you up to speed if you're like, well, I don't know if I really feel confident to do this. But the TTI, the Tri-EQ, like that's my go-to. I use with any client that I'm working with, I use the Tri-EQ plus the ACI. Mm-hmm. And it's such a great tool. I start with disc and driving forces, but once we get to the EQ portion, I say, we've been working on emotional intelligence the whole time, because understanding your disc, understanding what the emotional triggers are for any given one, my C-score is a 90. What's going to trigger me is somebody changed my plans. That
makes me happy.
That makes my husband. Dr. Phil loves change. Like, he gets really bored. So the things that are going to trigger us emotionally are so different, Right. And so understanding the disc and driving forces, it's like, these are the things that are going to trigger us. If somebody has a really high D score, they're going to get triggered by people moving slowly. That's just not going to trigger me. I'm like, hey, I'm cool with taking our time. So, that is a fantastic tool for supporting the emotional intelligence of saying, what are the specifics to each person that are going to be the emotional triggers?
Well, and who doesn't want to be more productive, get along better in the workplace, because we spend so much time with our coworkers and with our team members. Exactly. So to me, it seems kind of like a duh.
It does seem like a duh. It does seem like a duh, except it just goes back to that. It takes time to recognize it. It takes time to learn. And it's just an investment. And it's not always easy. Once you do recognize, I'm not in a good place. And if it's a bigger, the breathing is going to help. But sometimes you need some longer term strategies. And that can be really challenging. Mm-hmm. And so it is a duh. And yet at the same time, I just want to keep reinforcing it. It takes time. It takes energy. It's not an instantaneous thing. And so that's the hurdle, is like with anything that's worth learning and worth doing well, it takes time and energy and investment. And so we have to embrace that and be willing to walk that journey on the front end.
Sure. But it sounds like the impact that it can make if you invest in it is pretty massive.
It is pretty massive.
For your personal life as well as potentially your professional life and the people around you.
Exactly. And back to that question about, the intelligence or any of the other skills, is like, if you have a brilliant strategic plan for your company, but you can't communicate that, or you're at odds, you're having fights and things with other people, then all of the skill and the talent that you have difficulty, dispensing that. Right. When you don't have that emotional intelligence. You don't understand the emotional resistance that you have, in your employees. And so it can be a vehicle for sharing those other talents and insights that you have.
Pretty powerful stuff.
I think so. Which is back to where we started. Like, why am I so passionate about it? It's so central, and yet it reaches into every facet of our lives.
Yeah. So I don't know how, but our time is almost up. We just had an incredible
about something
conversation
that we enjoy and we love and are passionate about. That's what happens.
So before we end, is there one thing, one idea, one thought that you want anyone who's listened to this conversation to walk away with? What's that one thing?
One thing. Emotional intelligence is central to human functioning, good emotional intelligence, but it takes time, takes energy, but it's worth it.
It is. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Laura, much for joining us today. This was a delight, and I am certain people got all kinds of good nuggets. I mean, you gave them 3 immediate things that we can start working on right away. So thank you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Working Progress. We're looking forward to seeing you on our next episode.